I admire, you've got a very nice book-lined library.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Addressing the Goals of COP-26 in South Asian Context, Pitfall and Explications, hosted by the Center for Governance Studies, CGS. Thank you for spending some time with us today. We are now live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. As a stakeholder of the society for the past few years, we are focused to address the challenges for the society. For the for the past few years, the challenges for Bangladesh in coping with the rapidly changing national and global scenarios. The center aims to facilitate collaboration efforts among the academic community, government, private sector, civil society, and development partners to discuss and exchange ideas of the issues which need to be looked upon. Our domain includes climate change and governance, which is one of the major concerns of the academic and policy arena, not only in Bangladesh, but also in the global scenario. This year, the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties COP26 will be hosted by the United Kingdom in Glasgow. The slogan of the COP26 is uniting the world to tackle climate change, emphasizing the importance of international cooperation to address climate change. In light of the COP26, the Center for Governance Studies is organizing this webinar, focusing on both the COP26 and current climate issues in Bangladesh and South Asia. The webinar is set to focus on addressing the following issues: climate issues faced by South Asian countries, barriers of implementation, the goals of COP26 in the South Asian context, collaboration, climate resilient development, and our responsibility towards future generation, role of the stakeholders, that is think tanks, NGOs, to achieve a climate-friendly resolution. And there are a few more things. How do people feel about climate change? How is climate change being talked about? How does all of these affect our behavior? Today, we have a very distinguished and excellent panel to discuss about all these issues. We have and will have with us Dr. Atiq Rahman, Executive Director, Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies, Architect Mubashir Hussain, President, Institute of Architects, Bangladesh, Ms. Soda Rizwana Hassan, Chief Executive, Bangladesh Environment Lawyers Association, BELA, Professor Rashid Al Mahmoud Titimir, Chair, IUCN National Committee in Bangladesh, Architect Mubash Iqbal Habib, Member Secretary, Bangladesh Puribesh Andolan Bapa, and Dr. Monjur Ahmed Chaudhary, Chairman, Center for Governance Studies, CGS. And we're very happy that we have with us chief guest, British High Commissioner to Bangladesh, His Excellency Robert Chatterton Dixon. Thank you, Mr. High Commissioner, for your kind presence. Before we go further, I have a few housekeeping announcements. Your active participation is important throughout the session. Right now, I'm requesting everyone on mute to avoid background noises that may distract you from listening to the webinar. Throughout the presentation, someone on staff will be managing the chat functionality. You can enter your questions and comments in the question box throughout the presentation. If you'd rather ask in person, you can also use the icon on the control panel to raise your hand to indicate that you have a question or comment. Now, without further ado, let me start with Dr. Atiq Rahman. Dr. Rahman is a prominent environmentalist, a scientist, development expert, and a visionary thinker in South Asia. He is well known worldwide for his pioneering role and contribution to environment and nature conservation, climate change, poverty alleviation, and sustainable development. He was honored with the highest United Nations Environmental Award, the Champion of the Earth, for the year 2008 in recognition of his outstanding and inspirational leadership and contribution globally, regionally, nationally, and locally to the protection and sustainable management of the arts, environment, and natural resources. Dr. Atiq Rahman, microphone is yours.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure to be here. Your Excellency, the High Commissioner, let me call you Robert, and we have met many times, and soon again we'll probably have further discussion. I am really in Grand Sultan in Srimongol area. Many of you might know. I'm on a sort of retreat of 18 members of parliament who have a caucus on climate change and migration, particularly on human migration in Bangladesh, which is now dominantly climate induced. So we are hoping to discuss with them. You cannot train parliamentarians, so we entered into discourse, but it's quite rigorous sort of discussion and training based on a number of issues. The key migration thinkers are here. So we are going ahead and doing that for the last 2 days. Today is the third day. So I'm sorry I can't be there with you in person, but nonetheless, this is as good as it gets. As to the COP-26, I have had the privilege to be participatory in the COP process, in the climate process, and in the climate convention writing process pre-1992, from 88 to 92. Then 92 to 95 was a pre-COP. There were international summit meetings, but it never turned into conference of party because of the, as you know, 55-55 rule of 55 countries, which adds up minimum to a 55% of the total emission of that time. So when that is reached, then the conference of the party could start. So it delayed quite a bit. And then there has been 25 conferences of the party, and we are into the 26th one, looking forward in Glasgow. Even 2 weeks ago, I was a bit pessimistic, but with the Bangladesh conditions being COVID dominated, and we were in the red list very recently, the UK has eliminated the red list of Bangladesh. So there is likelihood that people could be present, those who have had 2 vaccinations, and they are of some resistance that can be built in. I'm still a bit, there is a sort of 5 to 20% probability that direct participation of many may not be possible. You know that in Conference of Party, the parties, which are all the nation states, 206 of them, consists of about 2,000 to 3,000 people, but it's 20,000 people who turn up. Now, Glasgow isn't a very big city with respect to mega conferences like this, but nonetheless, every possible accommodation within and around Glasgow has been consumed, and very few opportunities are left. Nonetheless, we look forward to be there, going there and participating. Bangladesh government will go with a pretty big delegation. Some of us may be included in the government. We are waiting for the final thinking of what that is the decision that the government at the highest level will have to take. Now, as to the content, there is a slight glimmer of hope with respect to the fund part, which is the so-called $100 billion. Now, this $100 billion coming out from Paris Agreement is $100 billion per year. Now, it's altogether in the last 5 years, not much has happened. So its accumulation, $100 billion doesn't make much sense, because most countries are spending more than $20 billion. Bangladesh is spending about $10 to $12 billion just on climate adaptation. I happen to be the team leader of the Bangladesh National Determined Contribution Study, or the report, which is basically the mitigation plan for Bangladesh. We have done that. I think it's a good job done, and we have reported it back to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It has shown tremendously well how many things has happened, which is pro-climate emission control. Big example, the whole course opening of the Padma Bridge will usher a new direction in which, though many cars will travel through that bridge, the total miles saved for people and the hours saved and the petrol saved therein is a huge amount. That is our contribution to this system. Our so-called improved stoves in hundreds of millions is being now going across the country, and people are using more advanced use so that the cooking stove do not emit as much, and with half the emission of burning wood, we can reduce it. As to the coal, there is a greater consciousness within the government to reduce the coal consumption, and it is coming out of the production of electric process. The decision has been made, the procedures are stepwise, and Bangladesh at this time is going through a real, very progressive electricity connection. Now, I, for one, as a citizen of the globe, I believe that every citizen has the right to electricity, has the right to efficient systems, has right to the energy use which can be done best for the country, for themselves, for their families, and therein. I had the privilege of pioneering and starting the photovoltaic revolution in Bangladesh, which I am now calling a revolution. When we started, we thought that was an opportunity, and we were started with a village around near Northingby in the middle of the river, in which 1,000 household was 1,000 household was going to be electrified. And I thought that if somehow we could do 10,000 households, we would have done our job. Most recently, the Prime Minister told us that 5.58 million households are now electrified with solar photovoltaic. Each household is an average 5-member. So we are talking about 22 million people of Bangladesh are getting direct lighting benefit and some on irrigation benefit out of solar photovoltaic. Something that I, along with my team, started as small, today has already grown into big. And the number of users, the 22 million, is the world's largest number of users in photovoltaic. Though we are not the largest user in the wattage and the voltage total amount of electricity used, because that Germany is ahead of us and several other European countries. So in a sense, we are doing reasonably well. Out of this 22 million people, about 4 to 5 million children are being educated and able to go to school because of the lighting they get in the evening, which enables them to do their homework, prepare themselves. Psychologically, they are much better off. Physically, they are better off, and health-wise, and with all that. So tremendous progress is going on. As to the COP-26, we will have to take the great messages from Bangladesh. Our Prime Minister is likely to be leading the delegation. So if that happens, she's already abroad now for other trips. So we hope she can lead the Bangladesh, and we will be there. So Bangladesh will go with a very progressive plan, progressive thinking, and contribute. So that is what we will do. But what the COP will do this time, it has to ensure that the long-term commitment that various countries are given to reach their zero emission target are already around the point, but the dates vary widely. That has to be brought down to 2030, 2040, 2050 to know where we are. If we cross 1.5 degrees centigrade by end of this century, we would be in real trouble. 2 degrees is too much, though that is the commitment under Paris Agreement. Given all that, let's just say that COP26 would definitely be a very good point at which heads of governments and many politically very loaded, it will be the thinking and decision. But the technical part, we have to ensure it's no more the point of talking, it's a point of doing implementation on emission targets. And for Bangladesh, our implementation essentially is adaptation is the focus. And adaptation, and we are talking about migration, if people are forced to migrate with increasing salinity, which is already happening, and the Bangladesh is going to be one of the greatest internally displaced group of people in the world. As a result, we must ensure those people have the right not only to be displaced from their own land, but be enabled to continue a life of dignity. And what we are proposing to the government is the 100 new economic zones that are being considered, has to be planned in such a way these are climate friendly, accommodating the migrant population, and climate-induced migration will have to become a major issue. So what we are doing in Bangladesh, what we will do in COP-26, and overall what will happen in COP-26 are the 3 points that I wanted to make in this morning. Unfortunately, I have to give a lecture here to the parliamentarians, so I'll beg leave from you, but I hope I've made some points which will stimulate your discussion. Thank you, Zulu. Thank you, Mr. High Commissioner, and we'll be again back. I'll be back in Dhaka tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be carrying on our discussion. And I'll talk to Robert sometime soon and start discussing a few of the other things better, deeper, very soon. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Zulu, I'm most grateful to you for bearing with me in this under stress timetable that you have got. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Atiq Rahman. Thank you for joining us from Sri Mongol and for your insightful speech. Now, I'd like to request Mr. Iqbal Habib to take the floor. Iqbal Habib is among the most known environmental activists and architects of the country. He's the member secretary of Bangladesh Environment Movement, Bangladesh Puribesh Andolon BAPA, active organizer and a public voice of some of the pressing environmental and urban issues. Mr. Iqbal Habib.
Thank you, Mr. Zilur Rahman. First of all, I am very
Mr. Iqbal Habib, please.
Yes. So thank you very much for giving me the floor. I think after listening to Mr. Atiq Rahman, I'm not going to come up with a lot of data, but I would rather speak on some of the burning issues which we think that in terms of adaptation, we need to focus. I believe the whole world is having two motivation in this fighting with climate change. One is to raise funds for those who are going to suffer and try to mitigate their sufferings and make the whole world as fighting as one. But another one is adaptation for individual countries and maybe individual sect of people. And from my side, I would like to raise our concern about 5 issues. One is the urbanization and urban agenda. You see, it is obvious that Bangladesh is going to suffer hugely in terms of migration from rural to town, though I believe the government has taken a very strong step. My village, my town and my village program, which is basically to take all the facilities, be it technological, be it public amenities, which is available in cities to village. But I think any of such steps is not going to stop the migration from rural to city. And it is calculated that almost 50% of the people will be in the cities. And cities like Dhaka is more than overcrowded, almost 47,800 people per square kilometer in the city corporation areas. And that is making things unbearable. Now, having this unbearability, we would always feel that if whole world thinks that they can come together, we need to have the housing technology, block development with modular technology, and also a huge support in housing fund. Unfortunately, having this as one of the fundamental rights of the people, cities are lacking hugely to have proper housing solution from middle income to down lower income. which is frustrating. And also, the funding for this sector is hugely inefficient and in terms of management, and also insufficient in terms of amount. I think the kind of $1 billion commitment and also $1 billion promises, I should say, it is obvious the technologies and the know-hows are available all around the world. But we need to understand it's not only the money. Sometimes it's sharing the knowledge, sharing the technology, sharing the innovations would be greatly helpful for countries like ours. Still, we are using barn brick. We are in a kind of oblivion state to understand how fast we can shift our barn brick to concrete block or more sustainable and environment-friendly construction material. In these areas, there is a huge possibilities of just transfer technology and assisting, supporting this sort of industries, or this sort of construction modality paradigm shifting by the assistance of each other. And I think that is an area I would like to take note that our discussion and our Honorable High Commission will raise this to his country and other European states to come forward and make sure that countries like ours have this technological support to take care of ourselves, by our own means. Second is nature-based technology for water and sanitation management. You see, our waters are polluted, rivers are polluted because of the densely population, urbanization, and inefficient and almost incapable management of the sewer, as well as searching for potable water. We are just bringing water from our aquifer continuously. This cannot go on. So having the technology, sustainable technology, of course, for potable water management from surface water, not groundwater, and also sustainable nature-based means and management for our water on the canals, on our retention pond, in our retention ponds, also the natural rivers around us, which we are polluting enormously. We also need efficient technical assistance in terms of housing and building formation, and also our infrastructural development. You see, unfortunately, our infrastructure development cost per kilometer, be it a road, be it bridge, even be it construction sector, is one of the highest in the world. And we are one of the, one of the country was trying to be, going beyond our poverty level. So it needs the innovation and technology, and of course, a kind of easy funding in this particular area. I believe environment equity must be an important area of investment nowadays. And I don't find that we are really having this in terms of equity. And as a result, even the development in our transportation sector in the city are all based on private owners' cars, microbus, or motorcycles and everything. We are not yet having a public transportation system, pedestrian domain movement, and also non-motorized transportation-based possibilities enhanced or invested. I think these 5 areas must be focused in our discussions with our other parts of the world, that we don't only want assistance in terms of $1 billion promises, which is, I don't know when it's going to be implemented, because promises are always promises. But I think the technological support, I think the investment in technological transfer, and also maybe some investment plan on financial management could be a great help. It can be just a win-win situation. in terms of financial support or funding, that where you can take the benefit, not only the social improvement benefit, but also maybe a small amount of interest. But I think the more bigger interest is the changing of the lifestyle management and changing of the capability to adapt to the situation. It is obvious, if I can make another point by telling you two examples, which is go beyond Dhaka. If you go to Chittagong, you'll find the salinity, which is grasping the whole drainage system, whole livelihoods management in Chittagong area, just because the water level rises very, very fast in last 10 years. And as a result, the city is having a unique scenario, which we are not even capable of handling. But I think there are many countries who has the technology, who has also the knowledge-based institutions, which can just put their hand with us and make sure we can have the capacity to adapt. And this adaptability is not just a word, it has to be a partnership. And I'm very sure and pretty much convinced that if we can take this point with a focus area, our partnership, our alliances can be more justified and practical. And sustainable development means we have to have these development philosophies, urbanism, not urbanization, the urban philosophy based on equity, based on environment sustainability, and that might make a just and sustainable economic growth for our country. I will end up here with the hope that I am talking about a very focused area, but I'm sure you understand when 50% of the country people will be in the cities, we have to be prepared. And this preparedness needs support assistance because it's all happening because of the climate change. I believe that this kind of sectoral discussion will make ourselves much more capable and will definitely endure these challenges with bigger perspective and equity. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Mr. Iqbal Habib, for your thoughtful speech. Now I want to move to Professor Rashid Al Mahmoud Titumir. Dr. Titumir is the chair of IUCN National Committee in Bangladesh. He is a professor of economics at the Department of Development Studies of the University of Dhaka. He is currently holding the charge of the chairman of the department. He is also the founding chairperson of the Unnayan Anneshon, a multidisciplinary independent think tank. Professor Titumir, you have been in the IUCN World Conservation Congress recently in France. So what's your take on France to Glasgow? Mr. Titumir, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Jillur Rahman, and CGS for organizing this timely webinar, His Excellency High Commissioner, and the fellow panelists. Obviously, while Marseille beaches tick all the right boxes, inlets carved out of limestone cliffs, idyllic boat trips to nature reserves, or to play sport, or to party with friends on sandy islands, and romantic swims in private nooks and crannies. But I would like to talk about Gabura, and if time permits, then I would talk about the takeaways from the Marseille discussion. So let's turn our focus on Gabura and try to understand the linkage between Gabura and Glasgow. Two cyclones amidst the COVID-19 struck the coastlines in Bangladesh, with the waves of the sea take the form of monster. Roads, houses, croplands, fields, shops were washed away by the tidal waves. Many people died, millions rendered homeless. The carcasses of cattle and wild animals float in the river. Forest deer of the Sundarbans came to the locality in search of shelter. Countless people who have lost relatives, homes, and livelihoods have been hit by new storms before returning to a normal life. On the one side, Gabura is the turbulent Kolpetua River, and the other side is the strong current-driven Kopotakko River. Cyclones, tidal surges, floods are the constant companions of the people of Gabura. Due to the continuous erosion of the river, these localities is getting smaller and smaller. The sixth assessment report of the IPCC, compiled by 134 scientists from 6 countries, paints a picture of the plight of the world's climate-endangered people, including those of Gabura. After the cyclones Cedar, Aila, Bulbul, Foni, Ampan, Yas, in Satkhira and Khulna, the ancestral vita or homesteads have gone into riverbeds. Many are forced to leave the vita of 7 generations. They have to take shelter on the embankments. Almost every year, embankments get broken and the localities are flooded. The severity of the disasters is increasing day by day. The destructions are accumulating. The people of the coast have somehow survived by constantly struggling with storms, tidal surges, and floods, what we all call resilience, and celebrate too. According to the IPCC report, climate change will increase the incidence of cyclones, tidal surges, and floods in Bangladesh and 11 other countries in the coming days. Thus, there are all kinds of natural disasters that the world has not seen in the last 2,000 years. The report warns that the situation is now spiraling out of control. Rising temperature has a relationship with increased propensity of cyclones, tidal surges, and floods. After the Industrial Revolution, the global temperature has risen by 1.1 degrees Celsius. During this period, the Indian Ocean has become more heated. As a result, the monsoon winds are getting stronger and causing more rainfalls. That is why floods are increasing along the banks of the rivers. At the rate at which the world is emitting carbon, the rise in temperature cannot be limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius, not even 2 degrees Celsius according to the Paris Agreement. The bottom line, there is no time at hand to tackle climate change. We have to take effective steps to deal with it as an emergency. The United Nations conference is set to begin on November 1st in Glasgow, and we'll discuss on how much the states will reduce their carbon emissions in the coming days. At the same time, discussion will be held on what can be done to reduce the sufferings of people endangered by climate change in different parts of the world like Gabura. Hamida Khatun, a resident of Gabura Union in Satkhira, was talking to me and our researcher of the Unnayan Anneshon about the plights of the residents. According to her, the embankment was broken by cyclone Aila and the entire Gabura was submerged in salt water. Since then, there has been a severe shortage of drinking water. The water level is not available even at a depth of 250 to 300 feet. They have to run for miles in search of drinking water. Gabura has only one deep tube well for 39,000 people. Most families depend on drinking water directly from the pond. Nazma Begum said that the water of the pond became saline due to frequent storms and tidal surges. The situation became more deplorable. Reproductive health problems of women are evident everywhere. Children are malnourished. Hamida Khatun added that they could not go to district or Upazila hospital for treatment due to lack of transportation facilities. Although services are taken from some local private clinics, these are neither adequate and nor of quality. Saidul Ghazi, a local, said that after Ailia, the cropland has become saline. Now paddy is no longer cultivated in these lands due to increased salinity. Owing to successive tidal surges, the plants do not grow well anywhere anymore. Green plants, fresh water is decreasing day by day due to increasing salinity. Most of the agricultural lands are now used for crab and shrimp farming. Many coastal locals, including Gabura, have far fewer shelters than they need. Most of the developing countries have submitted to the UN to pledge to reduce carbon emissions, which is known as NDCs. while countries with the highest carbon emitters like the United States, China, and India are lagging behind in NDC submission. The UNFCCC says that even if the countries that have already submitted NDCs, if those were achieved, the United Nations Secretary General day before yesterday says it would take light years. The world is using 120% more fossil fuels than required to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Despite its commitment to tackle climate change, multilateral development banks continue to invest in fossil fuel-based energy projects. The Urge World, a German-based environment group, says the World Bank invested more than 1.2 billion since the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015. What about most effective energy solutions along with technology transfer to the developing countries for transitioning to renewables? China pledged yesterday that they wouldn't finance the coal-fired station. Let's see. Rich nation plays 100 billion a year, a 50-50 divide between the adaptation and mitigation. The reality turns out people in some of the poorest countries are getting only $1 per capita per year to deal with the effects of the climate crisis. As of today, the British Prime Minister shore up to 60% of 100 billion, and that to 11 billion promised by US President, which depends upon the Congress and, as you all know, mercy of Senator Manchin and Republican senators. Developed countries are making pledges without effective measures, which are in conflict with the Paris Agreement. For example, in the run-up to the conference, the host country, the United Kingdom, reduced its overseas aid from 0.7% to 0.5% of GDP, renewed oil and gas exploration in the North Sea, and reduced incentives for electric vehicles. Such decision conflict with the promise to reduce carbon emission to zero. Although not responsible for climate change, Bangladesh is one of the most affected countries. Added to these is the increased pressure of the forcibly displaced Rohingya population of Myanmar. More than 600 acres of forest have been destroyed since Myanmar's million displaced Rohingyas crossed the border. Soil, water, forest, biodiversity are under great threat. The world leadership doesn't seem to play an effective role in resolving the Rohingya crisis. Mr. Alok Sharma, president of the COP, visited Bangladesh earlier this year and said, I quote, Bangladesh is at risk due to climate change. I have visited the Sundarbans and seen that many people in Bangladesh are living in that area at risk. Millions of people in other parts of the world are also at risk. They need to be helped. But Mr. Sharma's efforts to provide adequate funding, as I mentioned earlier, for the affected countries is yet to be noticed. Sustainable use of natural resources must be ensured without hastening the destruction through arbitrary extraction. Above all, the production system must have to be sustainable, green, and ecology friendly. It is important to get out of the life-destroying system and preserve the natural ecosystem, such as forests, rivers, etc., by emphasizing on the balanced relationship between human being and nature. In this regard, there is no substitute for global cooperation, partnership, and above all, political goodwill. If we were to achieve the SDGs, 3 decades of progress have been washed away by the COVID-19, and widening inequality is further exacerbated by vaccine nationalism. As many of you know, I try watching a film in every evening. Last night, YouTube popped me a British-made for television drama film, The Girl in the Cafe, which was first screened on BBC One. The story is of a G8 summit. Lawrence, a senior civil servant working for the Chancellor of Exchequer, falls in love with a young woman by chance in a cafe. Lawrence takes Gina to a G8 summit in Reykjavik, Iceland, where she confronts the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom over the issue of MDGs, the early incarnation of the SDGs. Poverty, debt, and trade, much to Lawrence's embarrassment and the anger of his employers. However, the civil servant realizes that she is right and tried to persuade the Chancellor and others at the summit to do about the issues concerned. The film ends with a Nelson Mandela quote, I quote, sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. You can be that great generation, unquote. I now pass the buck to the able hands of His Excellency Mr. Robert Chatterton Dixon, British High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Will Glasgow hit to the cries of Gabura? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor, for your thought-provoking comments. May I now call Ms. Soda Rizwana Hassan, Chief Executive, Bangladesh Environment Lawyers Association, BELA, to give her speech. So the Rizwana Hassan is an attorney and environmentalist. She has particularly focused on regulation for the shipbreaking industry in Bangladesh and was awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize in 2009. She was also awarded the Raymond Magsaysay Award in 2012 for her uncompromising courage and impassioned leadership in a campaign of judicial activism in Bangladesh that affirms the people's right to a good environment as nothing less than the right to dignity and life. She has also been dubbed as a hero of environment by the American news magazine Time. Advocate Soda Rizwana Hassan.
Thank you very much, Lur Bhai. But putting me after Dr. Titumir is not doing justice to me. He has actually been very elaborate and has touched upon almost all the points that I wanted to talk about. I'm actually talking to you from Bogra because I'm out here for a field visit. So immediately after my 2-3 minute speech, I'll have to leave. Everyone will have to excuse me for that. See, I see as an environmental activist and someone who has also visited Gabura, I see climate crisis as a justice issue, and it's also an equity issue. And whatever expectations I have from the upcoming COP is from that justice perspective. We have heard even our even our Prime Minister saying that if we can't really prevent the emission of greenhouse gases at a satisfactory scale, then 1/3 of Bangladesh, meaning 21 districts of Bangladesh, will have to go underwater. And it's being feared that by 2050, we will have many coastal districts disappear from the map of Bangladesh, which means I'll be forced to redraw the map of my country without having any fault of my own. It is not my development model that has led to a crisis like this. It is the development model of the developed countries that has led the world to a crisis like this. So I think the first call should be mitigation. And we must ensure, and particularly considering the recent report that has been given by the IPCC, we must ensure that our NDCs are ambitious enough and we actually go for rigorous implementation of our NDCs so that we really do not face a day when our neighbor Maldives will disappear from the atlas, when 42 small island countries will disappear from the globe, and 1/3 of the landmass of Bangladesh will go under sea. We certainly don't want to see a day like this. So the call from countries like Bangladesh, the low-lying countries, small island countries, would be for a higher mitigation standard, because even with all the NDCs implemented, we'll actually not be reaching that 1.5 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. So in this respect, we have to be very, 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 very ambitious, and we have to see some leadership from the Western countries, because we really haven't seen the expected leadership from a country like US. I mean, it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So with the science established, I think the developed countries should take the onus of rectifying the wrong that has been committed to the atmosphere, and the developing countries, the fast developing countries, should also follow the path. So I would definitely urge for higher standard for controlling our emission, and I definitely would like to see more leadership in the Western countries. Now, coming down to adaptation, I was just reading an article by Dr. Salimul Haq, maybe today or tomorrow, about how the developed countries, despite repeated promises, have not actually disbursed the committed amount. But money, as it can solve many of our problems. It can't solve all of our problems. So in Gabura, as Titumir Bhai was saying, there were actually money that were diverted for construction and repairing the embankments, but the money actually went into someone's pocket. So while the developed countries must fulfill their promises about disbursing adequate money for us, adequate and new money for us to deal with the adaptation challenges, it's also important that our national government set up a transparent policy so that the money actually reaches the communities, reaches the people who need it the most. We have a climate fund, and Bangladesh is actually hailed for having its own climate fund and diverting at least 8% of its total budget for tackling climate change. But the fact remains that there are concerns about the projects that are being funded under the climate fund. I mean, it's Bangladesh's fund, that's all right, but it's the fund that's coming from the pocket of the taxpayers. So those should actually be going to the people who need it the most, should be going to the coastal people. And Bangladesh should also, the whole world should also rethink the model of development. This model of development is not at all sustainable. Giving you a few statistics, our air is the most polluted air of the world. Our deforestation rate is double the global deforestation rate. 90% of our agricultural land have lost fertility at different scales. So these are really worrying factors for us. So while we press for mitigation, it's also important that we have a very smart, very clear, very bottom-up adaptation place, so that even if the Western countries again fail to deliver the amount of money that they have committed, which in any way is not going to be adequate, we have to ensure that we don't destroy our natural resource bases so that the adaptation choices become limited for us. The 8th 5-year plan of the government of Bangladesh in the sector that has dealt with environment has said environment, sustainable development, and environment and climate change. And there Bangladesh has said that there are other developing countries who have adopted the principle of first grow and then clean up. But Bangladesh has been very smart. Bangladesh has not taken that path, and Bangladesh is from the very beginning following a green growth model. I think that's somewhat a mockery. Given the statistics that we have, I don't think that's the reality. So Bangladesh, my urge to the government of Bangladesh would be not to wait for the money for the foreign governments to give to us. They may again fail. We have to ensure that our natural resource bases are protected and that those are not destroyed in the name of development. And we have to actually make that promise of green growth and honest commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, CGS Advisor, Ms. Soda Rizwana Hassan, for joining us from Bogra and for that excellent space. May I now request Institute of Architects, Bangladesh President Architect Mubashir Hussain to turn on your microphone. Mr. Hussain is an urban planner and educator. He is currently the President of Commonwealth Association of Architects. He also served as the President of Architects Regional Council Asia, ArcAsia. Mr. Mubashir Hussain.
ধন্যবাদ, শুভ সকাল। আমি প্রথমেই এই এত জ্ঞানীগুণী ব্যক্তির বক্তব্যের পর আমার বক্তব্যটা খুব স্বাভাবিক। আমি আমার দেশটাকে নিয়ে চিন্তা করব। সম্প্রতি আমরা করোনার সময় একটি অদ্ভুত জিনিস দেখতে পেয়েছি। সারা বিশ্ব একতাবদ্ধ হয়ে করোনার হাত থেকে মুক্তির চেষ্টা করছে, কারণ করোনার রিচ পুয়ার কাউকেই চেনে না, সে শুধু মানুষকে আক্রান্ত করে। অর্থাৎ হিউম্যান বিং অফ দ্য ওয়ার্ল্ড তার অ্যাটাকের একমাত্র জায়গা। ঠিক একইভাবে আমরা যদি চিন্তা করি, তাহলে ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ অনেকটা ধারণা করা হচ্ছে যে গরিব দেশগুলিকে আমি অর্থ দিব, যেহেতু তারা ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের সাথে জড়িত না। আমি ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ করব, আমার পয়সা আছে, আমার প্রয়োজন আছে, এবং গরিবদেরকে আমি অর্থ দিব, তোমরা চুপ থাকো। আমার মনে হয় এই জায়গা থেকে আমাদেরকে বেরিয়ে আসতে হবে, কারণ আজকের আলোচনার মধ্যে প্রতিটি ক্ষেত্রে আমি শুনতে পেয়েছি যে আমাদেরকে অর্থ দিতে হবে, আমাদেরকে ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের ক্ষতির পূরণ দিতে হবে। নো, ক্ষতি পূরণের আগে আমাকে আলোচনায় বসতে হবে যে হাউ উই ক্যান স্টপ কার্বন এমিশন। যেভাবে করোনাকে করোনার হাত থেকে সারা পৃথিবীকে মুক্ত করার জন্য রিচ অ্যান্ড পুয়ার অল আর ইউনাইটেড। কারণ রিচ কান্ট্রি জানে যে তাদের দেশ করোনা মুক্ত হলেই তারা মুক্ত থাকতে পারবে না, কারণ তাদের দেশে অন্য দেশ থেকে লোক আসবে যেখানে করোনা আছে। ঠিক একইভাবে এই ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ শুধুমাত্র সমুদ্রের পাশে যারা বসবাস করে, আইল্যান্ড আছে, তাদেরকে এফেক্ট করবে না, সারা বিশ্বকে অ্যাট দ্য এন্ড ইট উইল এফেক্ট। সো আমাদেরকে অবশ্যই যেমন ভাবে আমরা আন্দোলন করছি ঠিক একই পদ্ধতিতে ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ অর্থাৎ লেট আস ওয়ার্ক টুগেদার টু অ্যাচিভ কার্বন এমিশন টু জিরো। এই জিনিসটাতে যদি আমরা সম্মিলিতভাবে প্রচেষ্টা চালাতে পারি তাহলে কিন্তু আমরা করতে পারি। এবং আমরা আমাদের নিজের দেশকে নিয়ে যদি চিন্তা করি তাহলে একটু অদ্ভুত জিনিস আমরা দেখতে পাবো। আপনারা সবাই জানেন শীতকালে ঢাকা শহরে, আমি শুধু ঢাকা শহর নিয়ে কথা বলবো, হাইয়েস্ট আপনার ইনহেলার বিক্রি হয়। ওয়াই? বিকজ এই যে ঢাকা শহরে যত গ্রিন প্ল্যান্ট রয়েছে সেই গাছের পাতাগুলি ফটোসিনথেসিস স্টপ হয়ে যায় বিকজ অফ দ্য ডাস্ট। সো আমরা যদি শুধুমাত্র এই ঢাকা শহরে শীতকালে গাছের পাতাগুলিকে নিয়মিত ধুয়ে ফেলতে পারি তাহলেই কিন্তু আমার এই ইনহেলার বিক্রি করার প্রয়োজন থাকবে না, কেনারও প্রয়োজন থাকবে না। অর্থাৎ কার্বন এমিশন, এবং এই গাছগুলি কিন্তু শুধুমাত্র আমাকে অক্সিজেন দেয় না বিনা পয়সা, এবং অক্সিজেনের প্রয়োজনীয়তা কোন পরিমাণে, কি প্রয়োজন, কতটুকু এই করোনাকালীন আমরা কিন্তু টের পেয়েছি। অক্সিজেন ছাড়া আমাদের বাঁচার কোনো উপায় নাই, এবং এই গাছগুলি আমাকে বিনা পয়সায় অক্সিজেন দেয়। আমরা যদি এই শুধু অক্সিজেন দেয় না, এই গাছগুলি আমাদের সমস্ত বিষাক্ত গ্যাসগুলি তার নিজের ভিতরে গ্রহণ করে নেয়, তাহলে আমার ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের ধাপ দুটি। একটি হচ্ছে সামগ্রিকভাবে সারা বিশ্বকে নিয়ে আমাকে কাজ করতে হবে, একতাবদ্ধ কাজ করতে হবে, হ্যান্ড ইন হ্যান্ড টুগেদার কাজ করতে হবে, এবং সবাইকে চাইতে হবে যে বাংলাদেশের শুধু না সারা বিশ্বের ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের ভিতরে আমরা স্টপ করব এবং আস্তে আস্তে পরিবর্তন করে আগের অবস্থা ফিরে আসব। তার জন্য আমাদের অনেকগুলি কাজ করতে হবে, যেরকম এলাকা ভিত্তিক প্ল্যান্টেশন, এলাকা ভিত্তিক কার্বন এমিশন বন্ধ করা। যেমন বাংলাদেশে বিগেস্ট কার্বন এমিশনটা হয় ইটের ম্যানুফ্যাকচারিং এ। আমরা আজকে কয়েক বছর থেকে যুদ্ধ করছি যাতে ইট বানানো বন্ধ হয়। ইটের বদলে আমরা কংক্রিট ব্লক ব্যবহার করা শুরু করেছি, এবং বাংলাদেশ সরকার সিদ্ধান্ত নিয়েছে আগামী 2 থেকে 3 বছরের ভিতরে আর ব্রিকের কোনো কনস্ট্রাকশন করা হবে না, যেটা ভিয়েতনামে অলরেডি করা হয়েছে। সো ইন্ডিভিজুয়ালি কান্ট্রিকে কাজ করতে হবে এই ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জকে স্টপ করার জন্য, আর সামগ্রিকভাবে সারা বিশ্বের সমস্ত দেশ, বিশেষ করে যারা সবচেয়ে বেশি কার্বন এমিশন করছে সেই দেশগুলিকে সাথে নিয়ে যদি আমরা কাজ করতে পারি, আমরা অবশ্যই আমি দৃঢ়ভাবে বিশ্বাস করি আমরা ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের করাল গ্রাস থেকে আমাদের দেশ এবং সারা বিশ্বকে রক্ষা করতে পারবো। আবারও বলি, লেট আস ওয়ার্ক টুগেদার টু অ্যাচিভ কার্বন এমিশন টু জিরো। Thank you very much.
Thanks indeed, Architect Mubashir Hossain. Now let's please welcome our chief guest, the British High Commissioner to Bangladesh, His Excellency Robert Chatterton Dixon. Before moved to Dhaka in March 2019, from September 2018 to January 2019, Mr. Robert was Additional Director, Western Balkans Program in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. From August 2015 to August 2018, he served as a director in the National Security Secretariat, NSS, in the Cabinet Office, heading the Secretariat team, supporting the National Security Council and the National Security Advisor. He was also responsible for consideration of policy on a range of international issues and had led responsibility in NSS for the Cross-Government Conflict, Stability and Security Fund and Prosperity Fund. He was head of the FCO Counterterrorism Department from 2007 to 2010, and British Ambassador to the Republic of Macedonia from 2004 to 2007. Mr. High Commissioner, it's over to you. His Excellency Robert Chatterton Dixon.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Zara, and thank you very much for including me in such a distinguished panel today. It's been an enormous pleasure to hear the discussion and to hear from the real experts in this, and it's been a reminder really of the extraordinary extent of the urban challenges in particular that climate change, the climate emergency represents in Bangladesh, but also of the impact that it has on people right throughout the country. And I was very struck in particular by the way that Tabora was used as an example, that example at a micro scale of the massive problems that we all face at the macro scale. I thought it was an extremely interesting and actually moving presentation, because in a way, what we have now in front of us is extraordinary evidence, scientific evidence from the IPCC about the scale of the climate emergency. I mean, the science is absolutely as clear as science ever can be about the scale of the problem and about what will happen if we cannot keep temperatures to the 1.5 commitment made at Paris. The real evidence that we're not going to be able to do that, and the very clear signs of what the consequences of that will be. Humanity could not have had a clearer scientific demonstration of the problem. And I think also we're seeing all over the world, including here in Bangladesh, real life examples of what we are facing. So, I mean, it seems like every month for the last several years, we've had, whether it's wildfires in Australia, record extraordinary degrees of heating in places like Canada and Siberia, and floods in Germany. And of course, Bangladesh, a place that has long been in the front line of the climate emergency. Now I think it's clear that the front line is everywhere. So it's a real reminder for us as we take on the responsibility in 6 weeks' time of hosting the COP summit, of the extraordinary responsibility that we have taken on. And I was very pleased, as was mentioned, that Alex Sharma, our COP president designate, was able to come to Bangladesh, had a very good series of meetings in June, including with the Honourable Prime Minister, who of course has a global role in all this as the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. And we look forward very much to welcoming her and her delegation to Glasgow, because both in terms of Bangladesh's role as a large and vulnerable country, but also its global leadership role, we really look forward to hearing from her and from the Bangladeshi delegation. So it's very, very good to have representatives of that delegation as part of today's event. I think one thing one can say is that climate now has really grasped the attention of world leaders. We are in the middle at the moment, as you know, of the United Nations General Assembly, the general debate that happens every year. And I think climate, more than any other issue, is the one that has grasped the attention of leaders. And we've had some progress there. We had, for example, the announcement by President Xi yesterday of China that China would fund no further coal-fired electricity outside China, and a recommitment on China's own nationally determined contribution, which was very welcome. We also had our own Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has used his attendance at UNGA to really highlight the 4 things that we're trying to achieve as the UK through COP. And he defined them really very simply as coal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, cash, and I'll talk a bit more about that in just a minute, because there's been a lot of discussion this morning about the role of climate finance, cars, where the switch to electric vehicles is clearly an essential part of achieving our climate targets, and finally trees, which is about protecting communities and natural habitats, and obviously is a crucial part of adaptation here in Bangladesh. So I'll just say a little bit about each of those. On coal, we very much welcome Bangladesh's nationally determined contribution, which includes enhanced emissions reduction figures and brings in new sectors, including solid waste and agricultural land management. And we very much hope that as the NDC evolves, it might also potentially come to include a 2050 net zero target, which I recognise is very demanding in the context of Bangladesh, but would be a really excellent way for Bangladesh to demonstrate its commitment on this agenda. And we very much appreciate what we are hearing about the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, which sets out the investments that are needed in practical terms to help reach zero carbon growth. And we'll be working with the government of Bangladesh on the development of a long-term strategy, setting out a pathway to net zero. And we look forward to being able to do some work on that politically around work that we will be doing ahead of COP-26. And there are some things that we also really recognise, which is the accelerated efforts here to phase out coal or to reduce the role of coal. The government's latest energy plans indicate a greatly reduced role for coal-fired assets. And they also indicate much greater interest and commitment to domestic and international investment in renewables. And as an outsider looking into this debate, it does seem to me that there is a real opportunity regionally for the undoubtedly huge hydro capacity in countries like Bhutan and Nepal, quite close to Bangladesh, to become part of the opportunity for Bangladesh to have a greater part of the country's energy from renewable sources. And clearly, there would need to be a regional approach to that because of the different countries through which this energy would need to be imported. But it does seem like there is a real opportunity both for Bangladesh to benefit from green energy, but also for Bhutan and Nepal to benefit from being able to sell clean power to its regional neighbours. So I think on coal, there is, as I said, there's been good progress at UNGA, at the UN General Assembly. We very much welcome the latest ambitions set out by the government here. But I think it's very important both globally and nationally that we continue to press on this because coal is one of the absolutely key areas for progress if we're going to try and come close to achieving the targets. On cash, I mean, I totally recognise what the speakers this morning were saying, that the rich world has not yet delivered on its promises. But I think there are good signs of progress. We've made this a major part of our COP priorities. And we've made progress under our G7 presidency. We are also in parallel chair of the G7 industrialized countries. And we've had a doubled commitment from our Canadian partners. We've had considerable increase from both Germany and Japan. And we are going to be using the last 6 weeks ahead of COP to really continue to keep up the pressure on our global participants. For our own perspective, we've committed to double our international climate finance to nearly £12 billion. So that's about $16 billion over the 2021 to 2025 period, with 50% of this allocated to adaptation and $3 billion to protecting nature. And both of those, of course, highly relevant here in Bangladesh. And we're also working with the Bangladeshi system here to try and open up systems which will enable greater degrees of private finance to flow into adaptation investment, which we think is really essential to maintain the progress that's being made here towards maintaining economic growth, while at the same time investing in adaptation and in mitigation. So in terms of coal, as I said, progress being made, further to go. I think the same is true of cash. And I think in some ways, as someone who's seen many international negotiations in my diplomatic career, it's not all that surprising that we haven't reached the target yet, because very often it's the sort of final stages of preparation for these events where you see the real money being put on the table. So I totally acknowledge that there is further to go, but I think that the political context between the UN General Assembly happening now and COP happening at the beginning of November, I think there's a real chance that we will get to the headline figure that we need to get to. I won't dwell a lot on cars because clearly Bangladesh is at the early stage of transition in terms of vehicles. I would note, though, that if a transition from fossil fuel powered vehicles to electric vehicles can be achieved, that would also have a major impact on the wider environmental problem here, which is obviously a significant problem of urban pollution in Dhaka. And that transition would obviously benefit both climate mitigation, but would also benefit the urban environment that we'll live in, and certainly recognise, I think, particularly in the winter months, that there is a very major problem with urban pollution here. And as I say, a transition on cars could also help that. And then finally, on trees, I mean, Alex Sharma, when he came here, as one of the speakers has already mentioned, made a visit to the Sundarbans, because the Sundarbans, I think, in many ways, is a really good example of the role that nature can play in adaptation, because preserving and protecting the Sundarbans is obviously a contribution on biodiversity. It obviously contributes to the role of mangrove, the world's largest or certainly Asia's largest existing mangrove forest as a pool of carbon, as a carbon soak, if you like. But it also shows how the Sundarbans plays an extraordinary role in protecting southwest Bangladesh from tropical storms like Amphan. And I think we've seen very, very recent examples of how the intact forest has an enormously beneficial role in all aspects of both adaptation and mitigation. So I was very pleased that Alex Sharma was able to see the Sundarbans at first hand and recognize the extraordinary opportunity that Bangladesh has to continue to protect the Sundarbans and to make it, as I said, both part of mitigation and also part of adaptation. So it's an enormously exciting agenda here. I recognize that there are major challenges on power and on ensuring the ability of this country to keep growing while playing its part in global mitigation. But I think real progress is being made there. And as I said, I think there is real progress also being made on making sure that the rich world meets its cash targets on climate finance. Just briefly, I'd like to say a little bit at the end about the way in which the UK and Bangladesh have a major partnership in this area. We launched last year a climate partnership because there's a lot of opportunity for us to learn from each other. We've held a series of high-level virtual forums, both on specific COP-26 goals, but also on the wider issues surrounding the whole climate and environment agenda here, because we have a lot to learn, in particular on adaptation, as well. I think in the UK there's a lot of expertise that we can offer in terms of all sorts of issues, including solar-powered mini-grids, which can be fed into the national grid, solid waste and medical waste management, which obviously is an important part of the wider environmental issue here, promotion of recycling, and also playing a part in enabling young people here, who of course are the most directed, the people with the biggest personal investment in this whole agenda, to make their voices heard. And we're about to launch, we hope, a larger climate and environment programme, which will cover adaptation and resilience, as well as renewable energy, environmental management, and partnerships. So it's a very exciting agenda here. I think we're into a really, we're obviously now into the final stages of preparing for COP. It's a big logistical challenge anyway, hosting the summit. There's obviously a particular challenge hosting the summit in the middle of a global pandemic. I'm very pleased that we have, as the first speaker mentioned, been able to take Bangladesh off our red list, which will clearly enable both effective Bangladeshi participation at COP, which we absolutely welcome and look forward to, but also the wider people-to-people contact, business-to-business contact that we need to develop the wider climate and environmental relationship between our two countries. And I just end by saying that this is a huge issue for everyone, of course, everyone who inhabits planet Earth, which is all of us. But I think it's really extraordinary how this agenda, more than any other, now grips the world, because we've had so many examples, as I said, of the real impact of climate that we're living with. And I think what we're now seeing at the General Assembly and elsewhere is the way in which, more than any other issue, this one is right at the top. COVID is a very big tactical issue. It's one where there's clearly a lot of immediate problems that have been created. But I think when we look at the deep issues that are driving the international system at the moment, then climate is right at the top. And what we would need to do as chair of COP is to convert that political energy that we've seen very manifest at the UN General Assembly. And we see all around us. I probably discuss climate more than any other single issue with people here in Bangladesh, both in the government and more widely. I think it's converting that political energy into the outcomes at COP in 6 weeks' time that we all know are going to be needed if the Paris commitments are going to be met. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. As I said, it's a very exciting, very fast-moving agenda, and it's great that there is so much expertise and so much passion on this issue here in Bangladesh, and it's always a privilege to talk to Bangladeshi colleagues and partners about the issue. So thank you very much, and for a really productive discussion, and look forward to continuing it in other formats over the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your wonderful speech. We have learned a lot from the host country point of view. Wish a successful COP26 and our best wishes to the host country, the United Kingdom, and its people. Now, I'd like to request Center for Governance Studies CGS Chairman, Dr. Munjur Ahmed Chaudhry, to conclude this webinar. As you all know, that he's a well-known entomologist of this country. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jil Rahman. His Excellency, Mr. Robert Chatterton Dixon, distinguished panelists and participants. I thank you all for participating in this important webinar. Climate change is an issue that affects most of us in this country and also all over the world. You know, Bangladesh is a frontline country as far as climate change is concerned. 2/3 of Bangladesh is less than 5-meter elevation. So if there is just a 50 centimeter sea level rise, 11% of Bangladesh will go down. You will be inundated. About 15 million people will be directly affected. And these will be the climate refugees. We are already facing Rohingya refugees. If now we have to face the climate refugees, then it will be a tremendous pressure on our socio-economic condition. You know, there were a lot of discussions, a lot of initiatives all over the world for the last several decades. So we had the Rio Summit, we had Kyoto Protocol, now we have Paris Agreement, Paris Accord. We are now going to discuss, Bangladesh is going to be represented by our Prime Minister in the conference of participants in Glasgow. There will be a lot of discussions. Probably the most important issues in this COP-26 will be the financing of climate mitigation and climate adaptation, and also the carbon trading. We in Bangladesh contribute only 0.3% of total global emission. Yet, we have to face this most serious consequences of global warming. If there is 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, then still there will be a lot of consequences for adverse effects on our lives and livelihood. Already we have more frequent cyclones, more severe cyclones. We have also these, inundation in our coastal area. A lot of people are displaced because of this flooding, and already actually we have. If you take a census, then there will be already a lot of people are actually climate refugees. They are living in the slums of Dhaka and other places. What is the main reason for this global warming? Is the increased emission, carbon emission, greenhouse gases. And why there is so much greenhouse gases? Because there is a real disparity between the high-income countries and low-income countries in the consumption of energy. I will just give one simple example. World Bank data a few years old, that in the USA, per capita electricity consumption is close to 13,000 kilowatt hour. In UK, it is about 5,000 kilowatt hour. But you know what, in Bangladesh, it is 320 kilowatt hour. Yet we are being asked to, reduce emission. We don't emit much. There are also many other aspects, many other products which which directly contribute to the emission of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide emission, where our contribution is insignificant. So it is not only the financing of $100 billion per year. That's what we are asking for. We are emphasizing on financing. We have to also emphasize on the attitude of the high-income countries about the reduction of their energy consumption. There were movements in the USA during the early 80s by H.T. Odom, and also in India by Amula Mukhani, that everyone in this in this world should be given an energy budget, that you are entitled to use so much kilocalorie of energy. In that way, there will be a real equity in in contributing the global emission and global warming. So it is not only the financing, it is not only that what we can do, what Western countries can do to reduce their level of energy consumption. With that note, I would like to thank you all for participating in this conference. On behalf of Center for Governance Studies, I again thank His Excellency Mr. Dixon and others to participate in this, for participating in this important webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our chief guest, His Excellency Robert Chatterjee Dixon, to all our speakers today, and thank you all for attending this webinar. Goodbye and good luck.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.